I call Chris Bishop.
Mr Speaker, now I quite like Fletcher Tabuteau, but I have to say, if I was a pupil in Professor Tabuteau's economics class, Mr Speaker, I'd be quitting and asking for a refund, because that was woeful, Mr Speaker. But I do like Mr Tabuteau. But what a contrast it's been between last night and this morning, because last night at 5 to midnight, the government benches here were full. We had 30 or 40 government MPs here backing our ministers, backing this budget and backing these important bills that we are passing this morning and last night. And there were only 3 or 4 Labor MPs last night at 5 to midnight. And something's twigged overnight, Mr Speaker. Something's twigged in the Labor Party overnight, and that is that Andrew Little's leadership is in mortal danger. So what do we see this morning? What do we see this morning? They flooded the opposition benches.
Order. I'd actually like to hear what the member's saying. So, well, if I can hear what the member's saying, I know whether he's talking on the bill. Chris Bishop.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I was making the point that when we were debating the KiwiSaver tax bill last night, the contrast to this morning is very, very stark, because the Labor Party twigged overnight that Mr Little's speech in the budget reply debate on Thursday was so woeful that his leadership is now in danger. And they've had to come down here this morning on this KiwiSaver bill and flood the opposition benches to hear another appalling speech from Andrew Little about matters that are important to the country. And wasn't it an interesting contrast during the budget and on this bill, Mr Speaker? We had the government benches outlining a clear program of action, including on this bill, Mr Speaker, and the opposition benches had nothing to say about the benefit increases that the national government is doing. Absolutely nothing. The party of the dispossessed, the party of the disenfranchised, the party of the working poor, the party of the workers and the party of beneficiaries, what did they have to say about the national government's increase in benefit levels? Not a sausage. Disgraceful, Mr Speaker. And then they come down here on this bill, Mr Speaker, and they cry crocodile tears about the prudent and sensible cuts that the government is making to KiwiSaver. Prudent and sensible. Let's get some facts on the table. Number one, there are 2.5 million people in KiwiSaver already. Okay? That's fact number one. 2.5 million people in KiwiSaver. It's proven to be very, very popular. When Michael Cullen set up KiwiSaver back in 2006, at this stage, the prediction was there'd be 700,000 people in KiwiSaver. So that target has been smashed, absolutely exceeded. It's been a huge success. It's been extraordinarily successful, far in excess than the architects of the scheme would ever have predicted. But that leads to the second fact, and this is the second fact that is important to remember. 2, the subsidies, the $1,000 kickstart, has been very expensive. The government has spent $2.5 billion over the last 7 years on the kickstart. So at a time of the global financial crisis, at the time of the Canterbury rebuild, at the time in which we have, as members opposite rightly and adroitly point out so often, we're trying to get the books back into the black, $2.5 billion is a decent chunk of change. And the ongoing fiscal costs of that are also very expensive. So it's very expensive, and KiwiSaver has been proven to be popular. But what that means now, Mr Speaker, and this is the very important point about this bill, is that this is now a nice to have. It's not necessary. 2.5 million New Zealanders are in KiwiSaver already. And let's not forget the existing incentives that remain to continue on KiwiSaver. The members' tax credit of $521 a year, the employment contributions that employers are required to pay. So there are plenty of good reasons to join KiwiSaver, Mr Speaker, and we are sure on this side of the House that members will continue to have it. Members opposite cry crocodile tears, and there's a huge amounts of hyperbole about how we're taking the ladder away. Well, sorry, Mr Speaker, removing a $1,000 kickstart from joining an already extremely generous scheme that will provide for people's life in the long term is not taking the ladder away from somebody. Taking the ladder away might be opposing important changes to benefit levels like the first ones we've done in 43 years, Mr Speaker. The party of the dispossessed and the party of the poor has nothing to say about the fact it's the national government that's actually making life better for those least off in our society, Mr Speaker.
So what are you doing next
Mr Speaker, and then we get to what Labor's promised and the schmozzle they've had in the last couple of days about their stance on superannuation and their stance on KiwiSaver. Because Grant Robertson, in one line, spent $500 million of the next Labor government budget, which hopefully will never happen, but in the unlikely event that it does, he spent $500 million in one line when he was asked on the Stuff chat, will you commit to bringing back the $1,000 kickstart? And he said yes. OK, that's fine. You can make that choice. That's the role of opposition, to outline alternative fiscal spending plans. But that one line, those 3 letters typed away, or a staffer typed on the Stuff chat, cost the government $500 million over 4 years. And it's just in line with their big spending agenda, Mr Speaker. We just add it to the very long spreadsheet that exists of Labor Party spending promises that Mr Cullen promised at the last election, and that Mr Shearer promised at the election before that, and that Phil Goff promised at the election before that. The promise to start the Cullen Fund super contributions again. The promise to bring back Moroccan cooking course subsidies. Remember that? Remember that? Remember when the Labor Party was outraged about the fact that we were making middle-class people who wanted to do macrame classes and Moroccan cooking classes at their local high school actually pay for it themselves, as opposed to get money from the taxpayer to go and learn how to rub spices on chicken, Mr Speaker. How ridiculous. So we're going to add this very expensive promise to bring back the KiwiSaver Kickstart contribution to the very long list of promises that the Labor Party has made. They have absolutely no fiscal credibility whatsoever. They took us into recession before the global financial crisis. They left us with a decade of deficits, and now they have the temerity to come down to this House and complain about debt and complain about how we're not back into surplus. Well, their record, Mr Speaker, their record speaks for itself, and it is appalling, and they should be apologising to New Zealanders for it. Mr Speaker, this is an important part of the government's post-budget measures to continue this economy on its growth track and continue to provide support to the most vulnerable New Zealanders. It is telling that on a Saturday morning, the government is removing essentially a form of middle-class welfare, a nice-to-have, but something that's not necessary anymore, removing that, and instead we are supporting beneficiaries and the working poor. And we find ourselves in this weird parallel universe where the Labor Party is supporting $1,000 for people who frankly don't need it, and opposing more money for the working poor that they like to cry crocodile tears about for the last 9 years. Disgraceful.
Mr Speaker.